Welcome. Someone else popped in. Michael is here. Thank you. I'll try to keep going. I'll try to keep looking at the chat area. But for the sake of time, like I was saying, we're going to record presentation. I'm going to switch over to Word. Where's the Word? There. No. Is everyone seeing that? I can't tell. Mike, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so this is a scenery workshop. Carl Bloom presented this, I think the first time was in 2014, obviously by that date. Then he presented it at our 2019 convention last year at the National. And after the convention, he said, I'm just going to throw away all this stuff because it cost me a lot of money to ship it out here. And I said, I'll take it and I'll do the clinic. Well, it's meant to be hands-on or at least get my hands dirty while I'm showing you. I'm not going to do that today, but I'm going to go through all the points and show you the pieces of it as though I were doing it without actually getting the room dirty. I like to get super dirty when I do stuff, and I try to keep as clean as I can, even when I'm doing plaster. But we'll just go through this. I have a PowerPoint as well, but this is the actual handout, and I can put a PDF of this on the website later. Okay, so the idea is to get your track work running well. Putting scenery in place or fixing your track work after scenery's in place is a pain. That's what I do. Most people ballast last because that's how in the real world, in nature, that's how it works. I like to ballast first because then that gets any kinks out of problems you've created by ballasting. Make sure the track runs really well, and then afterwards I can come up and do the scenery. Once the scenery is done, I can fix up the ballast if I have to. Mount any tunnel portals. I've got some pictures of that. Keeps scenery away from blocking the trains, and helps to keep the track clean. I'll show you an example of cutting the forms out of plywood for the hills and the mountains. Don't forget about keeping access hatches. You can slap down a big mountain and then not be able to reach inside it, so that'll be a pain. For rolling hills, drape the carpet pad over the forms. That's what we're going to mostly be talking about, is using carpet padding. And I'll show you an example of that. I've got half a roll from when we finished a room in the basement. I got a lot left over. A lot of times the people will throw out scraps that are 10 times as much as you'll need if you use it for doing scenery. Yeah, and overlapping smaller pieces, it's easier to work with than working with one large big piece. You can push and pull and move it around. Before we get down to the paint and glop, I'm going to switch over. See if I can switch over to another program. Go to here. So let's show. We start at the top. Okay, so here's a picture of it. This is finished scenery using this technique. Foam rubber, low cost, flexible, versatile, relatively fast, easy to repair, looks okay. I'll get to that looks okay part. I like to make things look awesome, and sometimes that's a matter of personal opinion, and so we can talk about that in the discussion at the end. Collecting materials, thin plywood or OSB for the forms. I've got some forms here I'm going to show you. Foam rubber, carpet padding. Like I said, people discard it. You don't have to get old stuff. Like if actually a friend of ours was doing some remodel and we got some for our shed. My son wanted to put some carpet down in the pad to make the shed look really nice for him to do his games out there. And 99% of the carpet's totally fine. There might have been one pea spot from their dog or something. You cut that part out and throw it away. But usually when people redo their carpet in their house, the padding is fine for our purposes. But new installations also, like I said, they throw away so much that they can't use it. It's a waste for them to use it, but for our purposes, it's great. You need staples, screws, glue. This is the usual thing. Portland cement. We used that in the application of the Gloop or Gloop, however he said it. It's kind of instead of using plaster, he calls it a glop, and I'll show you. And then filler trash and the obvious ground foam. There's an example of carpet and the pad being thrown out. Leave the carpet, take some of the pad. Um, I'm not a fan of this kind of scavenging, but you can find stuff that's useful in that as well. So, like we talked about, finish the track work, tunnels, get the wood forms, and the solid foam rubber. That's different. That's like a seat cushion. That's that's a different kind of foam, and I'll show you that in a second. This is a pretty cool idea too, to do basically mountains as flats. I'm not going to go over this part, but it's the same type of technique. What was that? Where you have uh, a form in the background and you cover it with the pad and then finish it off.
Don't cut out.
Sounds like someone's not on mute and they're not asking me questions. So here's some of the tools, simple tools. Most of them we usually have. Look at that one putty knife that's got some ridges in it. I'll show you a close up of that later. And then, so that picture there, remember that's the unfinished and there's the finished. So at a few feet distance, that's very believable, especially with the scenery in front. It's amazing what you can do using this technique. This is another area where they've got the forms started. You can see the tunnel portals to protect the track. And then got that padding taped over. Now that looks like that's one big piece, and that's definitely doable. But remember, in the other paperwork, it said use smaller pieces to make it a little bit easier. It just depends on how accessible the area is you're working on. Okay, before we get to what is goop, let me switch back over my screen. I'll show you this form. This is a cool little form that he made just for the demonstration. It's like a little A-frame stand. By the way, this is my train room. We would have done this at the rec center, but I get the pleasure of being in my train room today. I'm going to go grab the first of the four forms. I don't know what those lights there. So this form, this is what you wouldn't normally do it quite like this, but this is good for a demonstration just to make this form. Let me pull this one out. This is a cool little piece, and what I like about it is the idea of I can take this, I can work on this at the workbench or in the garage somewhere other than a nice place like the finished train room. When I'm done with it, then I can bring it here and install it on the layout. That's just basically a separate clinic, but I really like that idea. You can see how, hopefully you can see how that piece just sits on the form. I'm going to have several versions of this along the form there. Now this first piece that I pulled out off camera, you can see this is one of those blocks of foams that I was talking about. You can pull it and rip it and shape it and get this. They've got this valley here, and this is some of the goop that's dried on it. And I'll show you some without that, but basically this area. Let's see if I can get that down there. This was manipulated, broken, torn, stretched to fit into this spot. So you can see that piece, hopefully, in right there. The rest of the area here will be formed up, and I'll get the other piece. So this is an example showing, that's some more of that block foam, just a different color. This is showing lots of different pieces of the carpet padding and how it's stapled in and manipulated around to form a little valley coming down. So you can see, I like the idea that if I, probably bigger than, this is about a 1 foot section, bigger than this at a time, then I can bring it into train room and not make a big mess out. I can make the mess out in the garage while I'm putting the goop onto it. Here's another form where you can see from the back side the carpet padding that's in there. But on here, we've got the goop laid in. Got some ground foam put in. It's starting to look like something. And I'm going to show you the last one real quick. And then we'll go back and talk about the goop part of it. So it's this one, and you can see, we can even have a locomotive running through the scene. This one has a little bridge into it, some animals, some trees. So this is a very roughly finished, what I would consider finished. There's some details carved in here. You can see how he just threw in some plaster. This plaster piece got broken, but it's easy to fix. This one has some carvings in it, in place. So it's a very believable scene, and it's pretty nice looking. The goop part is where you can really fine tune this and how much you play into it. So a lot of times people will, let's see where I can put that. Want to over detail something, but if you're going to be 6 or 8 feet away from it, you don't need extra ultimate realistic detail. For your up close things you do, but this scene is perfect for one that's several feet away, that it doesn't need to be super detailed. And because I don't see a lot of details in those mountains, but like in those first pictures I showed, the mountains are kind of far away. and it's very believable. You're just creating an impression so that the mind fills in the gaps. One second here. Let's go back to that other slide. Let me find that one. Okay, the glop, or gloop, or whatever you want to call it. It's a mixture of latex paint and Portland cement. The various wood shavings and floor sweepings can be added for texture. You can see, I'm pointing at it, but you can't see me pointing. You can see like the sawdust. It's really rough sawdust. It's not the fine stuff. On the right, that is just leftover stuff. There's the cement in the middle. There's the paint on the left. Cover everything else you want to keep clean. Use short paintbrushes. So you're painting on this glue. You mix it up with the Portland cement. I'm just looking at some of these things. You can use things like old wreaths. Like sometimes we've used a wreath on the door for a couple of years, and then it starts to fall apart or disintegrate. You can use the parts of that, like the pine needles. You're not using them as pine needles. You're using them as a ground foam substance. Go back to here. In this bag, you can see just those plastic pine needles from an old tree or something. We've got this sawdust has really fine, thick pieces and then fine at the bottom. You can use all of that. For my son's Eagle project, we cut up a lot of 2x4s, and I have a lot of sawdust that I just swept and put into bags. At work, someone was planing down some walnut, and so I've got the sawdust from walnut, and that looks like it's a good ground foam already. But put this into this mixture, all this stuff, and it gives the Portland cement this big, rich texture, and that's what we're glopping on. Here's before it's really painted. I don't know how well you can see that, but there's all the texture and these. He even cut up a paintbrush, and the bristles from an old paintbrush are in there just to make texture. That's the biggest idea behind this, is getting a lot of texture into your area. Obviously, if you're doing it in scale, you want a little bit finer texture. You don't want things to stand out too much. But in O scale or HO, this is a great way to get a lot of texture quickly. I'm just reading over that other sheet. Let's go back to that. I'm going to click this button. Okay, we're looking at the gloop. Like I said, drop cloth is a good idea, even on the floor, because the gloop just plops over everything. You want to protect your track. So instead of adding water to the cement, you add latex paint. Tan and gray is what's used here, and then that colors it as you plop it on. And you want to like cake batter. Then here he's saying add the texture. That way, this is what we're looking for. Make sure you get good ventilation. The cement does give off a little ammonia. It shouldn't be too bad. Just to make sure you have some ventilation. If you know you're susceptible to some kind of allergies, just be careful. You know yourself. And then while the mixture is wet, you can add your regular ground foam. You can plant your trees. It's easy to poke holes. Plant the trees because it's the foam. And here's the supply list. We've talked about most of all of these things already. Like I said, I'll have this page on our website. Let me go back to show you a couple tools.
I put it in the chat already, but my question here is define thin when it comes to the plywood or OSB.
Okay, I'll do that in just a minute. I'm looking for, oh yeah, one trowel has the notches. I think you can buy that way, but I think he ground it into this one. And so when you're troweling it on, that will help create a texture. I gotta point it at. Can't see where I'm pointing. There, somewhere over there. So the idea is when you use the trowel. Anyway, I like that trowel, so I'm going to use that. For the OSB, well, this is a thin plywood. This is like an 1/8 inch, maybe 3/16. This form, you can see, I'm going to say that that's a 3/8 thick. That part doesn't really matter. The idea is this is light. And so besides using this technique, this is a way to fill up the area quickly with a light material. In the past, the traditional method would be to use a screen with plaster, or coat it with either plaster itself or the plaster gauze, which is fine. But if you want it to be light, then this is a way to fill a large area quickly. Now, adding the Portland cement, that's a light cement, so it will add a little bit more weight. So this one's heavier than this one, but not by much. And taking this whole idea, I thought of at work when we hang really heavy pictures. We use a product called Z-Bar. And instead of having the wire in the back, there's a bar. And it's kind of like the same technique where you have, it's a Z, where there's a bar here and a bar on the wall. And this will hook onto that one. And so having that just hang off of it, it makes it easier. And when you're in like a living room area versus a dedicated train room, you could take it off the wall, work on it, make a mess, and bring it back and have it really nice. That's my plan down the road. That's it. I know I went over it really quickly, and I didn't mix up the goop. That's the basics of the technique that I plan to present. Probably would have gone in more detail where we're in the same room. We've got 11 people online now. What questions does anyone have? Define thin. I saw that one. Anyone else have any more questions? Thinking of anything else? Oh, I've got a few more pictures. Let's show. Let me go this way. Okay, 1 second. Let's switch over. Okay, there's Carl. He's the one that gave the presentation. There's some of the mountains in the background that we saw earlier. This is a larger scale than most of us do. That's a good example. I think that was in the opening shot of the slide. Now, using your X-ray vision eyes, you can tell, if you really think about it, that this slope and that little valley area were probably made with the carpet padding. And then it doesn't have to be the Portland cement glop that he used or he talked about. It can be any kind of adhesive or material, but the idea is you don't want just the carpet texture showing through. You want something other than that, and that's why adding the ground foam, adding sawdust, adding shavings, whatever it is, to this mixture gives it a really outdoor earth look feeling to it. And so this is probably one of the best shots showing that technique in real world application. The mountains, the background, that's kind of a weird zigzag in my opinion, but it still is a cool effect, and those may or may not have been done with that same technique. Maybe it was done with the block foam carved or something. So anyway, I do like that shot. And I especially love Shays, so I like that one. There's Carl, and I'm not sure who that guy is, but I think they're laying the golden spike for that layout. And actually, that is the same spot we just saw, just from a different angle and without any of the ground laid in yet. So that's kind of cool. Of course, there we can see the padding behind, getting ready. There's that same view from a different angle. There's a, where was that? It's not that area. It's an access hatch. Looks like a control panel on the left. Up above, those look more like speakers. I'm not sure what all those are. Oh, maybe those are for turnouts. But there's a track behind there, so there's an access to get to that track. That's what we were talking about earlier. Make sure that if you have hidden trackage, that you have some way to get to it. There it is, closed up. So yeah, those were turnout controls on the top we saw. That's a foam board mock-up. I've done something similar to that at one point. Same area, just a little wider view. You can see the smoke in the background, the clouds, the cotton ball smoke. It looks like forest fires going on. That's that same hill, but from the opposite end. Well, that's that same area. I remember that's that passenger car. Remember we saw the foam padding on the background. And the front just had the fascia on it. So that's the finished area of that same area that we saw before. There's a different angle showing those background mountains. I've got an area where I want to have some high mountains, and having the low relief like that, I think, is a good idea. There's some more of the mountains in the background there. Let's see. This one, I'm going to go back in the tunnel portal on the left. I can tell is used with that Gloop, the Glop. One thing about it is that he does use the Portland cement, and so that's the cement texture, along with all the other stuff that's mixed into it. It does give it a nice rocky looking area. Overview. That's the same area we were talking about, just zoomed way out. Let's see. That one. Okay, that's basically it. One thing I was thinking of was this may not be a technique that you'll just jump out and start using right away. I saw the presentation not quite a year ago, maybe 9 months ago, and I really liked how it looked. So it's something that I've filed away in my brain. Obviously, I have the display to look at, and the handout. It's something I'm going to do down the road, and so I think it's a good technique that you may not, like I said, you may not use it right away, but it's something that you can have down the road. One of the questions I see was how heavy it when it dries. I don't have a scale, but when I was looking at this one without the cement on it versus the one with the cement, it's a tiny bit heavier. This one is good. You can see how it just has that block foam. It's just he just rips it into sections, to help form and to get the creek bed in there.
Yeah, I meant the Gloop.
The Gloop isn't very heavy. It's hard to really say. This one and this one, they're pretty light.
I mean, if you had to guess, would it be percent heavier or 20?
This one I would say is like maybe 6 pounds, and that one's only 4 pounds. So not much. Rick asked about connecting sections. That's a different clinic. Sorry. No, that is a good question. For some, I'm just looking at, like, this isn't meant to run a train right over it. It's just a demonstration. But if I dress this up nicer, I could get those to connect. There are a couple different ways to connect those, but I haven't gotten to that point yet. And like I said, he didn't talk about doing that. That was something I thought of while he was giving the clinic. Alan asked about how making adjustments before it dries. This module, like I said, he got his hands really wet, and there were drop cloths on the floor. When he stapled this pad, he stapled it on, put the Gloop on. before the clinic, well, after the clinic was over, but before it set, he ripped it off so that it wouldn't dry hard on this one. So I would have a good, you know, that's a zero, number one module, number two. Otherwise, it would have looked like this one probably. This one has it dried on, so I would say you got a good half-hour working time before the cement starts to harden. Anyone else? Well, it was fun. It was different. It was a little nerve-wracking, but um, having people giving feedback in real time is good. Having people on the call giving feedback is good.
We'll have to figure out the feedback problem,
Yeah.
the sound.
Okay, I'm scrolling back in some of the pictures. I mean, some of the comments. It looks like what did Rick asked about static graphs? I see something about that. Rick, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Well, what I was curious about was how well static graphs would work with something like this.
My thought is it would be after. So when I look at this last module, this to me, this isn't a finished module. This could be considered finished maybe if it was really far in the background, but I could see like adding some static grass to the hills right here, and it would just be like any other base that you're adding it to. This is just basically for your substructure. The whole idea is you have to get from here, which is just plywood, to get all the way over to something like this. If I'm using this technique, I would not stop at this level. I would add more ground foam, add more paint variation. Like that's pretty much one color, and the crevices and the ins and outs and the shadows from my lights give it depth. But I would add more paint texture directly to it. There's, he's got several different ground foams. This is actually real dirt with sawdust mixed into it. And this is some ground foam that I might apply to some trees. But again, I would take this phase and go another step beyond it by adding static grass and adding some of the more realistic trees, not just these little things. Does that help answer your question? Okay. He said yes, for those who didn't hear him. Okay. As I'm standing here, you can look around my train room. A little messy. I didn't anticipate doing this today. I didn't clean up. This is one area I really want to get to is my sawmill. But going out this door is another room. And the tracks leaving here going out, there's going to be a hole in the wall. And I want to apply this technique in the other room. One, hanging it on the wall. And two, being able to take it away and then bring it back. But secondly, to have this kind of material and have a real proof of concept on an actual layout, not just a demo of the material. So I'm in giving this clinic, know that I haven't actually done this physically myself. I'm just regurgitating a clinic that I saw that I thought was pretty cool. So some of these techniques, and hopefully learn at least maybe something that can apply to what you're doing to your layout one step further. But the one thing that I've learned is just start doing something. It's great to finish something, but starting is half the battle for a lot of us, and getting up out of the chair is a lot of fun. It can be comfortable in that chair, but expand yourself and grow your horizons, and get working on a layout. All right, I think that's it.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Next month, we're going to have see if we can get Fred on the same platform and give his turbine clinic. And